Okay. Hi, Kelly. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Oh, my pleasure. Nice to see you. Nice to see all your books as well back there. So, as we were talking about, you're doing kind of a limited personal appearance for the new book, which is called Top Story. Now, this is part of the series. Was this part of the series that we talked about last time?
Yes, it's part of a different series, but the first book in the series is called Front Desk. This is probably my most popular book. This is the book that I'm known for. And this series is loosely based off of my real life experience managing a motel when I was only 8 years old with my parents in California. So my parents got this job managing a motel. Of course, they had no idea what they were doing. They had no experience in the hospitality industry. My mom was an engineer in China. My dad was a doctor. But we took the job anyway because they really needed the money, and it came with free room, free boarding. And quickly, it became really apparent that they were going to have to spend all of their time cleaning the rooms because there's about 30 rooms in the motel, and there was nobody else working there. And so that meant that there was nobody to take care of the front desk. And so I decided at the young age of 8 that I was going to try to do this job. Now, of course, people walking in, checking in, they looked at me and they did not want to deal with an 8-year-old. So I had to really convince them that I was up for the job, that I was going to be this amazing manager who had great customer service skills. And so, yeah, that's what started the whole series. We're now in book 5, Top Story. Mia and the whole gang, her whole family and her friends go up to San Francisco, where she is actually, she has the opportunity to go to a journalism camp. She's a writer, so she really loves this opportunity. She's trying to track down an amazing top story so that she can get it published.
I'm curious, why did your parents decide to make the move to the United States when they had seemingly good professional careers in China?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think like a lot of immigrants at the time, especially coming from China, my parents, even though they had these great careers, they had gone through a lot in China. You know, they had lived through the Cultural Revolution. They had seen my grandparents, their parents, get taken from their homes, and my dad was shipped off to the countryside to do manual labor, and they were worried about what that would mean in the future, whether we would have a repeat of that, whether it was going to be turbulent for me as well. And they really wanted, I mean, my parents are intellectuals, they're academics, and they really wanted me to have that intellectual freedom to be able to read what I wanted and say what I wanted and think critically and not have to worry. So America, even though it meant giving up their careers, seemed like a great place.
Okay. What year was it that they came to the United States?
It was like early 90s. I was 6 years old.
Early 90s. Okay. All right. And so they actually bought the motel?
No, that part is made up. We had the opportunity to work in it, but we were not even, I mean, I don't even think we even imagined owning it. It just seemed so far-fetched at the time. I mean, we probably should have tried to somehow get some money together and, go in with a bunch of friends, but we just never did it. So they ended up working at 3 different motels because the owners were always selling them and they would have to find another job.
So you said the latest book now is called Top Story, and Mia is sort of your alter ego, right? Was
Yeah.
this story brewing in your brain sort of the whole time you were a kid, or did this come to you later in your life?
Well, some of the scenes were definitely brewing in my brain, particularly the scenes between Mia and Jason. Jason is her nemesis in the first book. She hates him because he's the son of the motel owner who's very mean, and he kind of torments her in school, and he's not very nice to her, and he's like kind of a bully in the beginning. But as they get to know each other, she realizes that Jason is going through a lot as well. It's not easy to have this overbearing father, and they become friends. And so by the 5th book, they now, have feelings for each other. Mia definitely has a little bit of a crush on Jason, which took me a long time to finally be able to get there in terms of the story. but it was always in my head that we would get there.
Okay, so Mia is now falling in love with Jason.
Sort of. Well, I mean, it's an innocent crush. It's like a childhood crush. They're definitely just starting to have feelings for each other. It's very sweet and innocent.
Okay, well, how old is Mia?
She is now 13 in the story.
Oh, okay. All right. And in the first book, she starts out, how old is she?
She's 10 in the first book.
Okay. Let me hit a couple of your talking points here because I don't remember what we covered exactly in the last interview. I think we covered more of your history and your background. So, what would you consider the central theme of Top Story?
Central theme, probably just not being afraid to tell your story and working towards your own solution, right? Like trying to be the change that you want to see in the world, not just sitting around and waiting passively for the solution. And I'll give you a good example of that. When I was 15, I was really frustrated that there weren't many stories about Asian Americans or people in my community being featured in the LA Times. Now, I mean, granted, this was the 90s. So it was very rare to see that. But I was kind of frustrated because I thought our community had amazing stories and there was always some new business, somebody was doing something interesting. And I realized, you know what, here's an opportunity. Maybe I should make a newspaper, or maybe I should try to make my own little newspaper. And I did. I have a copy of it right here to show you. This is my little newspaper. It was called the Penn Times. I think at one point it was even published in Chinese. It was like English and Chinese. And see, it says right here, for 80 cents an issue, you can have the Penn Times delivered to you. Order today. I printed it at Office Depot on just regular paper. They all thought I was a bit strange wanting to print this. I think I printed like 200 copies a month and I distributed it all over town. And it was a really great way for me to see that I can do something about it, that I can be the change that I want to see in the world.
So is Mia, now that she's 13, does she have a job at all, or is she just going to school and doing this on the side?
Yeah, well, her job, I mean, she works a lot. She works at the motel. She's still managing the
Oh, she's
desk,
still
checking
doing,
people
okay.
in.
Okay.
She also, I mean, she's also writing a ton. So she's definitely wearing many hats.
So what do you think the overall message is for the kids?
I just want them to be proud of who they are. And I mean, like in Top Story, there's a lot of stories that she uncovers about all the residents and all the people who live in Chinatown, the indigenous community that live in San Francisco. And she wants to write about all of that and make people understand that, being unique, being different is a good thing. It's a virtue. It's something that you're adding to the table, that you're bringing to the table. And I think it took me a really long time to understand that. And I want to make sure that kids growing up know that message, that they feel it in their heart, that they're going to get out there and tell their own top story.
When you were writing the first book and you got that done, did you have difficulty getting it published?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Front Desk, originally wrote Front Desk for my son, Elliot, because he had no idea how I grew up. And that was because growing up, I didn't have books like these. So I never told anyone. And I didn't even tell my own family until, when I wrote the book. And then my son, at the end of that summer, he was like, you know what, Mom, this is a really good story. You should do something with it. And I was kind of like, well, what am I going to do with it? He said, you should try to get it published. And he said, if you don't, that's okay. Just let me make copies and I'll sell them to my friends. And that's when I was like, uh-oh, I better do something about this real quick. So I started trying to find an agent, a literary agent, which just involves researching and emailing them. I got an agent pretty quickly, but when it came time to submitting it, we submitted Front Desk to 20 publishers and 19 rejected it. So it was only one wonderful woman named Cheryl Klein at Scholastic who said, yeah, I'll take a chance on it.
How many books have you sold? Do you know?
How many books have I sold? It's in the millions. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty amazing. The Front Desk book is a very successful first book. I never expected it to resonate so much with people, but I think it just came along and everyone just really fell in love with this character and they're really drawn to her story, and she has a really unique voice. So yeah, it's been a wildly successful ride. It's also been full of ups and downs. There have been multiple attempts to ban my books. It seems like every other day there seems to be a new attempt. But you know what? It hasn't really, I think a good story is a good story. And I think that although we have these waves of book banning, it is not going to stop the tide turning, which is everybody wants to read about the world. Young people want to read about the world. They want to read about themselves. We are increasingly diverse as a world, and that's just natural that we're going to have stories about the people who live in the world.
Why would they want to ban your books?
Because they're ignorant. I don't know. I think some people don't necessarily think that kids need to read about the immigrant experience, that it's not really relevant to them. And my answer is, well, but we have a lot of immigrants in this country. And the whole point of literature is to step into someone else's shoes for a day and understand what they're going through. And if you want kids to later on grow up and know how to deal with people in the workplace and get along with other people, they have to be able to have that empathy. They have to be able to read and understand and think critically and learn about the world around them. So I think it is really foolish to ban books. I think it doesn't work. Whatever you're afraid of in books, it's just better to have a conversation with your kids about it rather than try to ban the conversation in general, because that never works. They're just going to have the conversation somewhere else, probably on social media with a stranger.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And, the whole country is immigrants. We're all from somewhere else at one point. So the idea that
Absolutely.
we shouldn't teach that is absurd.
Yeah, and there's something in these books, they really relate to everyone. It isn't just about the immigrant experience. It's about just everyone who feels different at one point, who's been a fish out of water. Maybe you've moved to a new school, you're finally, living in the suburbs for the first time. And it's that experience of being new to a place and having to navigate that while hanging on to who you are.
Well, I think on that, we're going to have to wind this down. Thanks so much for coming back on the show. It was nice to see you again. Give out your website, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My website is kellyyang.com, and you can follow me on social media at kellyyangHK.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again. Best of luck. Top Story is out now.
Yes, top stories out wherever books are sold.
How many do you think you're going to do in this series?
Oh, that's a good question. I will keep going as long as they let me.
Well, maybe you can get all the way up to when Mia's a grandmother.
That'll be so funny. Thank you so much. This was a real pleasure.